My sister once posted a picture captioned, "Family trip without the burden." The burden was me. Stay with me as I walk you through what really happened. And if my story connects with you, don't forget to show some love. Drop a like, subscribe, and maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Ember, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet one in my family. I worked hard, kept to myself, and never caused trouble. But it never seemed to matter. My older sister, Victoria, was the one everyone praised. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If she came home late, it was, "Oh, she's busy." If I did the same, it was, "Why can't you be more responsible?" That difference followed me everywhere. At school, Victoria always had the newest clothes and the loudest laugh, while I was the one carrying the extra chores at home. If something went missing, somehow it was my fault. If she wanted something, my parents found a way to make it happen. And me? I learned early not to ask for much, because it would only be turned into another reason why I was difficult. But nothing cut deeper than what happened with the so-called family vacation. I didn't even know about it until it was over. One day, I opened my phone and saw Victoria's post. There she was with my parents, standing on the beach, drinks in their hands, all smiles. And the caption? "Family trip without the burden." At first, I didn't even understand. Then it hit me, the burden was me. They had taken a whole trip, called it family, and didn't even think to tell me. It wasn't that I didn't want to go. I would have loved it. I had been saving up for months, hoping maybe I could plan a little getaway for myself someday, because vacations weren't something I ever expected to be included in. But to know they had won and deliberately left me out? That broke something inside me. I stared at that picture for a long time. I couldn't cry at first. I was just numb. Then anger rushed in. Anger at Victoria, who had clearly convinced them I didn't matter. Anger at my parents, who didn't even question it. And anger at myself, for letting this dynamic go on for so long. Still, I didn't say anything right away. I knew how it would go if I confronted them. Victoria would laugh it off, my parents would defend her, and I'd look like the bitter one. So I kept quiet, but inside, I made a promise to myself. That would be the last time they erased me so easily. They thought I was the burden, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. I didn't find out about the vacation until it was already over. At first, I thought maybe it was just a short day trip, something casual. But when I saw the photos, it was clear they had gone for days. There were pictures of them on the beach, sitting at a fancy restaurant, even smiling in front of a hotel pool. All of them together, except me. What cut the deepest wasn't just the trip itself, but the story behind it. Victoria had told my parents that I was too busy with work, that I wouldn't enjoy the beach anyway. She painted me as someone who didn't belong, and they believed her without even asking me. My parents never even thought to check if I wanted to go. They just packed their bags, smiled for pictures, and pretended that was the whole family. I only knew because Victoria made sure I did. She showed me the photos when they got back, scrolling through them with a smirk on her face like it was nothing. Then she stopped at the one with the caption, "Family trip without the burden." She didn't need to explain who the burden was. She looked at me as if waiting for my reaction, almost daring me to break down. In that moment, it felt like the air was sucked out of my lungs. My chest tightened, my hands shook, but I forced myself to stay still. I wanted to scream, to ask my parents how they could let this happen, but I swallowed it. I knew if I cried or raised my voice, they would twist it back on me, say I was overreacting, being dramatic, or jealous of Victoria. I'd heard it all before, so I just nodded, pretending it didn't matter, while inside my heart cracked into pieces. I replayed all the times I'd been pushed aside growing up. When Victoria stole my clothes, and my parents laughed instead of scolding her. When she lied about me, and they believed her without question. When she got rewarded for things I worked just as hard for. All of it led to this moment, where my family stood on a beach without me and called it happiness. That night, I sat awake staring at the ceiling, the images burned into my mind. For years I told myself I didn't care, that being quiet and staying out of the way was easier than fighting battles I couldn't win. But this time, something shifted. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had erased me. Victoria wanted me gone, and my parents let it happen. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I stayed silent, but not because I was weak. This time, I stayed silent because I needed to think. I needed to plan. If Victoria wanted to treat me like I was invisible, fine. But I wasn't going to stay invisible forever. I couldn't shake the caption from my head. Family trip without the burden. It played over and over like a cruel echo. The more I thought about it, the more every memory of my childhood with Victoria came flooding back, and suddenly it all connected. She had always been working to push me out, to make me feel small, to make sure she stayed on top. I remembered being kids, and how she used to steal my clothes, then laugh when I got scolded for losing them. She would whisper lies to my parents, like telling them I skipped homework just so I'd be grounded, while she went out with friends. And every single time, they believed her without question. I was the one standing there trying to explain, only to be told, "Stop blaming your sister. Why can't you just get along?" The older we got, the more subtle she became. She didn't just lie anymore, she manipulated. If I got good grades, she'd twist it into me being a teacher's pet. If I worked long hours to save money, she'd say I was antisocial, that something was wrong with me. She poisoned the way my parents looked at me, and I let her, because I thought staying quiet would keep the peace. But this vacation? This was different. This wasn't just a trick or a petty lie. This was deliberate, cruel erasure. She had stolen my place in the family entirely, and my parents let her. That was the breaking point. Something inside me hardened, and I realized I couldn't play the quiet sister anymore. If I stayed silent, I'd stay the burden forever. Once I made that vow, I started paying attention in a way I never had before. Victoria wasn't perfect, not even close. I noticed how she bragged too much, how she spent money she didn't have, how her stories never quite lined up. She strutted around like she was untouchable, but I saw the cracks forming. I noticed the credit card bills she left lying around, the way she dodged calls and quickly deleted emails. My parents, blinded by their golden child, kept covering for her. If she missed a payment, they made excuses. If she lost a job, they blamed the boss, not her attitude. If she picked a fight, they said she was just stressed. I used to let it slide, but now I kept mental notes. Every mistake she made was another piece of the puzzle, another thread I could pull later. I wasn't going to explode or scream, because that would only make me look unstable. No, I was going to play the long game, the kind Victoria would never see coming. She thought she could erase me, but she underestimated. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just going to endure her cruelty. I was going to make her face it, every ugly piece of it, until there was nowhere left for her to hide. After that breaking point, I shifted my focus. Instead of wasting energy trying to get my parents to see me, I turned inward. I threw myself into my work, picking up extra shifts, saving every dollar I could. While Victoria spent her nights at bars, posting pictures with friends, I was studying online courses, building skills, and slowly climbing my way toward the life I want. It wasn't glamorous, and no one applauded me for it, but I knew it mattered. My parents didn't see it that way. To them, every choice I made was a reflection of my selfishness. If Victoria needed help moving, they asked why I wasn't available. If she needed money for emergencies, they asked why I didn't lend her mine. Whenever I said no, I became the problem. You only think about yourself, Em. Why can't you be more like your sister? The words stung, but this time, I didn't argue back. I kept my head down and let them think I was the same quiet, overlooked daughter I had always been. But while they underestimated me, I was watching. I noticed the way Victoria bragged about things she couldn't afford. A new designer bag, though she hadn't held a job in months. A weekend trip, even though I had overheard her arguing with a bank representative about late fees. She thought no one paid attention, but I did. I saved screenshots, wrote down dates, and quietly built a trail of everything she was hiding. At family dinners, Victoria sat at the center, laughing loudly, telling stories that painted her as successful and adored. My parents soaked up every word, nodding like she was their pride and joy. I sat there with a small smile, pretending to listen, pretending not to notice how she twisted details to cover up her lies. She would brag about paying off her credit card when I knew she'd just applied for another one. She would say her boss praised her when I knew she had been fired 2 weeks earlier. And my parents, they clapped their hands like they were watching a show. The old me would have tried to speak up, to expose her right then and there. But I was done playing that game. Instead, I stored everything quietly. Every reckless purchase, every debt collector's call, every time she borrowed money and never paid it back. Each lie was another card added to the house she was building, and I was patiently waiting for the day it would collapse. What kept me going was the knowledge that I didn't need to scream to be heard anymore. I just needed to be patient. Victoria thought she was untouchable, that she could erase me from the family without consequence. But while she kept digging her own hole, I was building something stronger. My independence, my stability, and my chance to finally let the truth come crashing down on her. It started small, just bits and pieces I noticed when Victoria wasn't careful. A bill tucked into her purse, a phone call she cut short when I walked into the room, a tense look that crossed her face when my parents asked about her job. For someone who loved to brag about her success, she sure seemed to be hiding a lot. I paid attention, and soon the pieces came together. Victoria wasn't thriving, she was drowning. One night, while helping my mom with laundry, I found a letter shoved into the pocket of one of Victoria's jackets. It was from a bank, marked final notice. The balance was thousands of dollars. My heart sank, but not from sympathy. It was the realization that everything I'd suspected was true. My sister wasn't the golden child. They had built her up on lies. The deeper I looked, the more I uncovered. She had multiple credit cards, all maxed out. She had borrowed money from loan companies, and the late fees were piling up. The worst part, my parents had unknowingly co-signed one of her loans, thinking they were just helping her with a small line of credit. They had no idea their retirement savings were now tied to her recklessness. For a moment, I debated what to do. Part of me wanted to throw the evidence on the table and scream, "See? This is the daughter you always chose over me." But I stopped myself. If I lashed out too soon, they would defend her like they always did. I needed to be smarter. This was the opening I had been waiting for, but I couldn't waste it. So I began collecting everything carefully. Copies of overdue notices, screenshots of messages she left on the family computer, even small notes she had written to herself about payment deadline. I became a quiet observer, building a case no one could ignore. Each piece of proof was like a weapon, but I wasn't planning to strike yet. I wanted to wait until the moment she couldn't talk her way out of it. In the meantime, I planted small seeds of doubt in my parents' minds. At dinner, I'd casually ask, "Did Victoria ever pay you back for that money last month?" Or when the phone rang, I'd say, "Strange, that number has been calling a lot. Do you think it's a bill collector?" I never accused her directly. I didn't need to. The hesitation in their answers told me they were starting to wonder on their own. Victoria kept up her act, smiling and laughing like everything was fine. But behind her back, my parents were beginning to share worried glances. They asked quiet questions they'd never asked before. And for the first time, I saw cracks in the perfect image they had built around her. That was when I knew my patience was finally paying off. The golden child wasn't so golden anymore, and soon, they were going to see it with their own eyes. The first call came on a Tuesday evening. My mom answered the phone, her usual cheerful tone fading into confusion as the person on the other end asked for Victoria regarding an overdue account. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it must have been a mistake. But then another call came, and then another. By the end of the week, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Each time, it was the same, collectors asking for payments, warning of consequences. I could see the panic building in my parents' faces. My dad sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bills he didn't recognize, rubbing his temples. My mom kept pacing, muttering about how there must have been some misunderstanding. But deep down, I think they already knew. The golden image of their favorite daughter was cracking right in front of them. That weekend, they called a family meeting. Victoria walked in with her usual confidence, tossing her hair like she had nothing to hide. But the second my dad slid the letters across the table, her smile faltered. "Victoria," he said, his voice tight, "why are debt collectors calling our house? Why is our number attached to all of this?" She stammered, then quickly shifted into defense. "This isn't what it looks like. They're exaggerating. It's just a mix-up. Ember probably went snooping again and blew this out of proportion." Her eyes cut toward me, sharp and accusing, like I was the villain. For a moment, my parents looked at me, torn between disbelief and desperation. That's when I calmly reached into my folder, the one I had been building for months, and laid out the evidence. Copies of overdue notices, screenshots of emails, even the loan agreement with their signatures as co-signers. "I didn't snoop," I said quietly, steadying my voice. "I kept track, because I knew one day you'd need to see the truth." The room went silent. My mom's hand shook as she picked up one of the letters. My dad's face turned pale when he realized their retirement fund could be at risk if Victoria defaulted. They weren't just disappointed, they were devastated. Years of trust, of believing in their golden child, shattered in a single evening. Victoria's mask broke then. She slammed her fist on the table, shouting, "This is all Ember's fault. She's been waiting for this, collecting things to set me up. She wants you to hate me." I looked at her, calm and unflinching. "I didn't set you up, Victoria. You did this all by yourself. Every lie, every debt, every choice, you made them. I just stopped pretending not to see." For the first time in my life, my parents didn't rush to defend her. They sat in silence, staring at the pile of evidence, realizing the truth they had refused to see for years. And in that silence, I knew the balance in our family had finally shifted. After that night, everything in our family shifted. My parents, shaken by the truth they couldn't deny, made a decision I never thought they'd have the courage to make. They cut Victoria off. No more covering her bills, no more signing papers, no more excuses. At first, she laughed like it was a bluff. She tossed her hair and said, "You'll come crawling back. You always do." But weeks passed, and for once they stood firm. The fallout came quickly. Without my parents funneling money into her problems, Victoria's world started to crumble. The shiny car she loved to flaunt was the first to go, repossessed in the middle of the night. I still remember her standing in the driveway the next morning, screaming into the air like someone had stolen her crown. Then came the eviction notice for her apartment. She begged friends to let her crash on their couches, but even they started pulling away. It turns out people who only stay for the parties and free rides don't stick around when the well runs dry. I watched it all unfold quietly. Not with joy, This wasn't about gloating or revenge parades. It was something deeper, a quiet satisfaction, knowing I no longer had to prove myself. Reality itself was proving me right. For years I was the burden, the background, the sister who could never measure up. And now, I was the one standing strong while Victoria's carefully crafted image collapsed under the weight of her own lie. My parents, once blind, began to lean on me in ways they never had before. They asked for my advice about finances, about how to handle the debt collectors who were still circling around. My dad even sat down with me one evening and admitted, "We should have listened to you sooner." It wasn't an apology for all the years of favoritism, but it was the closest thing I'd ever gotten, and it meant more than I could explain. Victoria couldn't stand it. Every time she saw them turning to me, every time she noticed the shift in the air, her bitterness grew sharper. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low and venomous. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? You wanted me ruined. You wanted them to hate me." I met her glare without flinching. "No," I said softly. "I wanted you to stop treating me like nothing. But this? You did this to yourself." She scoffed, rolling her eyes, but I could see it, the flicker of fear behind her arrogance. For the first time, she couldn't twist the story in her favor. The golden child had lost her shine, and no amount of blame could change that. As she stormed out, I realized something. I didn't need her to admit I was right. I didn't need revenge served with fire. Watching the truth finally catch up to her was enough. The day Ember signed the papers for her new house, she felt a quiet fire settle inside her chest. It wasn't the loud, gloating kind of victory. It was the kind of satisfaction that came from years of swallowing her sister's barbed words and watching her parents turn a blind eye. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving in her family's shadow. She was stepping into her own light. Victoria had always bragged that she'd be the first to own property, to plant her flag in the world. She used to say it at every family gathering, tossing her hair and smirking at Ember across the table. "Some of us are meant to lead, Ember. Some of us are meant to follow." Yet now, when the movers carried Ember's boxes into a cozy two-story home with white shutters and a small garden in the back, it wasn't Victoria who stood proud. It was Ember. Her parents came to help her settle in. Her mother unpacked dishes while her father carried in furniture. They didn't say it directly, but Ember could feel it in their every gesture. They were proud. They saw her. For years, they had poured their energy into Victoria, rushing to fix her problems, funding her dreams, ignoring Ember's steady progress. But now Victoria had nothing left to show, and Ember had everything. At the first family dinner in her new home, the shift was undeniable. For years, Victoria had dominated conversations, her job, her friends, her plans. Ember had been the afterthought, the quiet listener. But now, everyone wanted to hear about Ember's mortgage rate, her neighborhood, her decorating plan. Her mother leaned in with questions. Her father nodded with admiration. Ember wasn't boasting. She didn't have to. The house spoke louder than any of Victoria's hollow dreams. Victoria, sitting stiff in the corner, could barely hold her composure. She tried to redirect attention, talking about a new business idea she had. No one bit. She laughed too loudly at her own jokes. No one joined in. The spotlight she'd once clung to had slipped from her hands, and it wasn't coming back. Ember didn't steal it. It had simply moved on its own, gravitating toward the one who had truly earned it. As dessert was cleared, Ember caught Victoria's glare. Her sister's eyes burned with resentment, but Ember didn't flinch. She didn't gloat. She didn't mock. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her voice calm but cutting as she murmured, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Funny. I thought I was the burden." The room fell quiet. Her parents exchanged looks, shame flickering across their faces. Victoria stiffened, her mouth parting as if to retort, but no words came. Ember didn't need to say more. The house, the silence, the truth, they spoke for her. For once, it was Victoria who sat in the shadows, and Ember who owned the room. Victoria showed up at Ember's doorstep one late afternoon, her hair unkempt, her once flawless makeup smeared from crying. She clutched her purse like it was the only thing left in her world. Ember opened the door slowly, her calm eyes meeting her sister's desperate ones. "Ember, please," Victoria began, her voice breaking. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you, but I miss my sister. I miss us." Her words dripped with practiced sorrow, the kind she used to manipulate their parents into forgiving her countless times before. Ember had heard it all before. Apologies laced with guilt, promises wrapped in lies, temporary remorse that vanished as soon as she got her way. "You don't miss me," Ember replied, her tone steady, her grip still on the doorframe. "You miss the benefits that came with me." Victoria's face faltered, but she quickly recovered, pressing on with trembling hands. No, I swear. I want to make things right. We were supposed to be sisters, best friends. Please don't shut me out. I'm broken, Ember. You've always been the strong one." It was the classic guilt trip, the same song and dance Victoria had performed 100 times before. Ember took a deep breath, her patience stretched thin, but her composure never cracking. Sisters don't treat each other like burden, Ember said firm, her eyes sharp and unwavering. You made your choice the moment you posted those words about me, the moment you made me feel like I didn't belong in my own family. Victoria flinched as though Ember's words were physical blows. But before she could fire back, there was movement behind them. Their parents, who had been quietly listening from the hallway, stepped closer. Her father's voice cut the silence. Ember's right. Victoria's head snapped toward him, disbelief spreading across her face. For the first time in her life, her father wasn't rushing to shield her, wasn't scolding Ember for being too harsh. He stood behind Ember, firm, his expression unreadable but resolute. Their mother nodded slowly, her eyes tired but clear. We've defended you for too long, Victoria. We excused everything. But enough is enough. Ember has carried herself with grace, even when you tried to drag her down. We should have seen it sooner. Victoria's lip trembled, her voice cracking into a whimper. So you're taking her side now? After everything I've done for this family, her mother stepped closer to Ember, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. We're not taking sides. We're finally seeing clearly. And it's Ember who deserves our respect. Ember felt a wave of warmth flood through her, a long-awaited justice she had yearned for silently. For once, she wasn't the overlooked, dismissed sibling. She was the one being acknowledged, defended, and valued. Victoria's tears spilled, but Ember didn't bend this time. She let the silence stretch, her words still echoing. Sisters don't treat each other like burdens. You made your choice. And for the first time, Victoria realized no manipulation could save her. The living room was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that carried weight. Ember sat at the dining table, sipping tea her mother had made for her, a gesture so rare it felt almost surreal. Across from her, her father leaned back in his chair, watching her with an expression that was both proud and heavy with guilt. For the first time in her life, Ember wasn't invisible. The family dynamic had shifted like tectonic plates, and Ember felt the aftershocks every day. She wasn't the one being talked over anymore. She wasn't the extra chair squeezed in at the table. She wasn't the sister labeled the burden. She was the one everyone came to now, the steady, reliable force. The foundation. Her parents admitted as much that evening. We were wrong, her father said, voice low but steady. His eyes flicked to Ember's, not shying away like before. We thought we were protecting Victoria's feelings, but in doing that, we crushed yours. And yet, you rose anyway. Her mother, teary-eyed, nodded in agreement. You've shown us what real strength looks like. I regret not seeing it sooner, Ember. The words stung because they were years too late. But for Ember, the sting wasn't poison anymore. It was fuel. She looked around the room and noticed Victoria sitting alone in the corner, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't dare. For the first time, no one rushed to her side, no one smoothed over her sulking. The family's attention, once her endless supply, had been cut off. She was starving for it, and it showed. Victoria's bitterness filled the space like smoke, but Ember refused to choke on it. Instead, she smiled faintly and set her cup down. It's strange, she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice the silence. She called me the burden, but I became the one you lean on. And she never saw it coming. The truth hung in the air, undeniable. Her parents exchanged a look that spoke volumes, acknowledgement, regret, and finally respect. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. There was nothing left for her to say. Ember stood, her movements steady, grounded, powerful. She wasn't the shadow anymore. She was the storm that had cleared the air, leaving the ground firmer beneath her feet. The final shift had happened, not overnight, not with grand explosion, but with Ember's quiet persistence, her resilience, her refusal to be defined by someone else's cruelty. And now, she wasn't just free of the burden label, she had rewritten what family meant. Victoria was left in the ruins of her own arrogance. Ember, on the other hand, walked out of that living room lighter, taller, and finally seen. Do you believe Ember was right to stand her ground and finally let her family see the truth? Or should she have given Victoria another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next one.